Lisa, you lead one of the UN's most strategic catalytic financing arms. Something I had the honor and pleasure of being part of the private sector advisory group back in the early, pre the ratification of the SDGs in April of 2015. And as we've seen through the work that is highly visible everywhere and through new partnerships, the Joint SDG Fund isn't just about funding projects. It's really about reshaping financial architecture of sustainable development. So we're really excited to have you here, and thank you for your time. So let's talk about catalytic capital at scale. Right? Everyone here, that's all they want to hear about sometimes. They're like, how do you scale capital? How do you turn $1 into 10 or even more? The Joint SDG Fund is known for unlocking public and private financing through blended models. We've now seen the calls for total redesign of the development finance system. That's what everybody's talking about this week. But yet, there are programs and systems like yours that actually is already doing it. From your seat, what does the next generation multilateral finance really look like? And how does the SDG Joint Fund intend to lead that shift?
Thank you, Sergio, and hello, everyone. Such an honor and a privilege to be here. I think the Joint SDG Fund represents this development system, some of whom you've met already today, right? You've met the World Food Program, you're meeting our colleagues that are working with the satellites in outer space. Imagine an arrowhead that combines or extracts the best of those parts of the UN development system, puts them into a pitch document, and takes it to Wall Street, Silicon Valley, London, and beyond. That's what the fund's trying to do. We're trying to market the bread and butter of what the UN does every day. We do policy acceleration, and we do de-risk investments with first loss money of precious government dollars, precious tax dollars that have come into the fund through official development assistance. The shift that needs to happen is we need to bring you with us. There's not enough of us anymore, right? The pool is shrinking, and with that shrinkage, there needs to be a lot more clever people looking for opportunities and helping that arrow point hit the bullseye, right? There's a lot of tremendous work being done by the UN in countries around the world. When you work together, when you align, you're so much stronger, and that's really the mandate of this fund. I want to bring WFP and the satellite work together in the same pitch. The risk is otherwise they're going to go separately. So the idea of the fund is one united UN system, and then the blending is where public money de-risks and attracts the private money. So you try to imagine a 100 million or 200 million ticket. Who's the first 10 million, which is often, I'm told by many investors probably in the room, the hardest to get, that first 10 million. What if the UN said, we're here? What if the UN said, we're advising government, we're going to do that feasibility study, we'll do the structuring, and through that you can have a level of comfort in what you may perceive as a very high risk investment context. How do we keep de-risking and putting that first loss on the ground?
Thank you, Lisa. So basically you're telling us that you're making the UN investable.
That's right. I think there is a lot of profit to be made in doing good and in investing in the Sustainable Development Goals. I mean, AI is digital transformation, and it's one of the hottest things, and we're seeing the headlines around how lucrative that is. Data centers are going to be needed around the world. That kind of infrastructure linked to AI is investable and is the same kind of work that the UN is trying to promote for job creation, for women's empowerment, for expanding opportunities to those being left behind.
So you all keep hearing the theme, as I said, think of the United Nations as your risk capital partner. We're celebrating 80 years of being on the ground across the planet. Why do you want to reinvent that? What's the point? Work, partner, collaborate. Every time I talk to a family office, I say, you know that there's somebody in the office who will validate. You don't need 10 brokers, 5, consultants to actually help you figure out how to navigate from Africa to Southeast Asia to Latin America. And so it's important that that point is made. And thank you for that, Lisa. So in our collaboration, we talked about from last week on Saturday, it feels like last week, I'm sorry, a couple days ago. It's been long days. Public and the fund aims to bring new actors to the table, right? This is why we're having this conversation so you all could hear. Family offices, philanthropies, innovators. But what needs to happen to make the multilateral system more investable, right? Because here we're having conversations, but clearly people are not listening. They're not hearing it. More investable for private capital, as you were mentioning before, without losing its public mission. Very important, right? Because de-risk. I tell people, like, what do you do? Sometimes they ask us, what do you do at public? I was like, we take the risk so that you all can come in and de-risk engaging the multilateral space. But what else? What can we make in the context of investable for private capital?
I think there's a lot of translation that's needed. I've grown up in the UN, joined right out of law school, and the terminology that I've learned from our institution doesn't always match the asset classes or the KPIs that investors do. So part of it is learning each other's language and realizing that when I say digital connectivity for the vulnerable, you mean a tower, you mean a cell tower. And when I talk about clean water and sanitation, you're looking at agriculture and acreage of real estate. So I think it's a little bit of learning each other's language, and I think it's a little bit of trying to also socialize that we are available as a resource. We work for the member states of which you all belong to. So we are a vehicle, a tool, a resource that we're maybe not used enough. Maybe you don't understand enough around development, what that means, that we have been there for decades building out the ministries of education, which could now be linked to those satellites, that could now serve those refugee communities, that could now improve GDP growth through the next generation. So we are in those places. It's always heartbreaking when initiatives start something new without just doing a quick context check of what could be done with us.
Thank you, Lisa. Now, last question, which is possibly the most important one. Leadership, trust, and women when we talk about finance. So you're not just leading capital, you're reshaping a system that's under immense pressure. Every day in the news, people think there's nothing going on. There's a lot happening across not just one country, 100 plus countries. But when you think about the role of women, especially women in finance, changing the multilateral space, not just women in finance changing and driving change in the multilateral space, what lessons from a leadership perspective would you share, not just with our audience here, but also with our next generation? Just yesterday, we launched a partnership with Chelsea Toller, who's back there, talking about reshaping the next generation of family office leaders because it's their turn to drive their family's legacy into the future, and it's being led by women, right? Tell us a little bit, what leadership lessons would you share for folks here?
Well, I've benefited from incredible female supervisors and leaders through my decades at the United Nations, and it's no accident that they're still my mentors and leaders. There's a connectivity and a personal fulfillment that I think women bring to the issues that they work on, and there are many, many powerful women that I still see out there against all odds, doubling down in this very difficult environment. I think the SDGs, this commitment to what the UN Development System stands for, remains our North Star. And I think we have to be open to finding leaders maybe in the less obvious places. I think, when you talk about emerging markets and you look at some of the announcements that are coming up this week, it shows that there is a lot more to come in the realm of international development and international finance. And I think the beauty about this fund is that we end up empowering women day after day through the transformation, through those large-scale, impact bonds, SDG bonds, these large fiscal instruments end up being the way that small and medium enterprises flourish that are led by women. So it is happening at a very local level, but I also think it's happening at a global level. I think we all are looking for ways to get involved now. There's a real existential questioning, I think, that many of us may be going through. I just want to say that the UN system does offer an inroad. We are here. Sergio is here, and together we are going to be marching, and join us on that march, and join us to change the future.
Lisa, you're an inspiration. Thank you so much. Lisa Kurbiel, head of the Secretariat of the United Nations Joint SDG Fund. Thank you, Lisa.